Well, let's get started, right? I think we've got a packed agenda back to back here, so let me get started with it. So, I am Srini Koushik. I'm the president of AI and sustainability at Rackspace. Just by way of background, I'm an enterprise architect and technologist, and for the last 25 years, I've been a CIO at Fortune 100, Fortune 200 companies. And even at Rackspace, the IT function reports up through me. So what you're going to hear today is really more of as a CIO, as an executive who's looking at AI, how do you implement this, in your organization? So if you want to talk about Neo4j and graph databases and others, this is not the session. But I'll actually kind of walk you through how and why you can get beyond that MIT study that says only 15% of the projects succeed in AI, right? And give you some learnings from it. I always start off my sessions by saying, if you're looking for an expert, look somewhere else. I'm not an expert. I am a practitioner. So you learn, especially in AI, you learn something every day. And I think that's the mindset that a lot of us have to drive it. So let me give you a quick rundown, right? And some of this, I'm going to set it up for context. If you already know it, please excuse me as I go through those things. But the first thing is, I've seen so many places where I've gone out and presented, or you go in and look at LinkedIn for posts and things like that, there's a lot of confusion, right? I see people kind of equate all kinds of AI as if they're all the same thing. I've seen so many consultants, the Boston Consultings of the world and others come back and say, generative AI, right? And they use it to represent the whole spectrum of AI. And these are different. The biggest difference, and first of all, the biggest difference between generative AI and agentic AI, in my mind, beyond the standard stuff you'll learn, generative AI is not deterministic. Meaning, if I ask a generative AI solution the same question 3 times, I am not guaranteed that I'll get the same answer. And why is that important? Any enterprise solution that you're putting in, trying to have a solution that doesn't give me a reliable answer or a consistent answer 3 times in a row, it makes it very difficult for me to put it into production systems because it's less auditable, it's not transparent, I can't explain why it came up with the results and others. So again, part of this is Srini's take on it after watching it for, I did my master's degree in AI 40 years ago almost, and then the last 3 years looking at it. I'm constantly surprised to see so many experts come in and say why did generative AI fail? If you understood how it actually works and how it gets translated, and even Meera Murati from Thinking Machines, right? They published a paper about 3 weeks ago that actually, we've been saying it's not deterministic. They've actually pointed out why it's not deterministic. It's fixable, and they're putting fixes in, but the reality is the way the workload has to be handled, it gets to translate that into GPUs. The NVIDIA model for doing that is CUDA, right? CUDA is the firmware that runs on it that translates instructions into how it gets executed. There's a challenge in the way CUDA allocates workloads, and that's the reason why you don't get it. So one of the first things that Thinking Machines is coming out with is to fix that. But the reality is, it is not consistent. Agentic AI actually starts to give. If generative AI is a cheap party trick, you go to parties and someone pulls out a magic trick and shows you're impressed, but not much I can do with it. Agentic AI starts to add tools to it. It starts to add reasoning, and all thanks, in my mind, it's all thanks to DeepSeek and what they did about a year ago. How they broke up the stuff, how they actually used it for reasoning, actually starts us to get into a space where you can actually use agentic AI to deliver deterministic results. And because of that, the power is pretty significant. And the way to think about it is, for agents to be useful in an enterprise, it has to be embedded. I thought a lot of time about this on these long plane rides, and the closest technology I can think about, in the last 40 years, that even comes close to representing AI is mobile computing, right? Mobile phones, the smartphone that started in 2007. Because prior to that, think about your day-to-day activities. banking. I had to go into a bank and wait in the queue to be able to get the service and drive it. Today, your entire banking experience is reimagined because of that phone and that connectivity that you have in that space. That applies to everything. I can get my medical records on my phone. I don't have to go to a doctor and sign at least in the US, a PHI form to HIPAA form to release those records and things like that. As long as I have an electronic consent, I get that. What mobile did and smartphones did was it changed how technology started to get embedded more and more into it. So over the last 3 years, generative AI has just been one of these spread it on top like ketchup or something like that. Well, I have a contact center application. I can put a generative AI application that does conversational interfaces. Why am I not getting an ROI? Well, it's an added cost, plus it's not deterministic, plus it's not this. It's very difficult to do that. But what agentic AI allows you to do is to start imagining how it gets embedded into everything you do. You're starting to see this, and this is not a very popular opinion for people who are Android fans. Apple always gets it right. You see all of these things on how they're late to the party and others because they haven't invested in LLMs. Well, iOS 26 came out, right? And they've been doing this slowly, but iOS 26 came out, and the two of the things they actually do is the live translation on the headsets, and one of the most commonly used applications on an iPhone is a selfie. Right? And how do you actually adjust the things, from that standpoint? It's embedded into it. AI is not going to be something that you call out, like Siri has already had it, and they didn't do a good job with it. But what you're going to see them do is to embed it into everything you do. So when you start looking at the world a year from now, 2 years from now, it's going to look very, very different. And it's not pull up ChatGPT and ask it to draw a picture of cats playing cards or something like that. It's going to be real applications that get embedded into it. And I put this up here just to say really, when you embed things in, one of the things that changes, think about it this way. For the 40 years plus, 50 years plus that we've had technology, machines have been training us to communicate with them. Machines can understand zeros and ones. So for me to communicate to a machine, I had to learn a language like COBOL or Fortran or Python or whatever the language is, and that got translated into zeros and ones. What AI has done, and large language models, the usefulness that it's brought in, is they can understand your language. And when you do that, embedding things in and doing so in such a way, if I had to do software development today, someone who understands the business has to give you requirements that has to be put into a use case, and then you go through the software development lifecycle to be able to do that. When it gets embedded, you can imagine that entire cycle being changed, where if a business user who understands the process can describe it in natural language, it should be able to get converted into code. That's not that far away. English is a programming language. There are prototypes out there that you can actually use it. The challenge with that today is, imagine this, I know all of us have kind of seen some version of this story. Let's say a Martian lands on Earth and they really want to figure out how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Try to describe it in English, right? And if I ask the 30, 40 people in this room, I'm going to get 40 different answers. So English language specifications, you have to be very specific to be able to take the coding. But those are things that will evolve, right? But imagine what happens when you don't have to do the translation from somebody's brain into a requirement spec that gets translated into user stories that I have to go through an agile process to kind of go build it. That completely changes. It really changes the way things work. And so what we see happening is these embedded agents, these agents are going to become your invisible co-workers. They are going to be working with you. At Rackspace, and we've done it for several customers, about over 100 customers, we see agents embedding themselves into different parts of the business. This 2x2 grid is pretty simple. On the bottom, it just says, what does it do, right? Does it kind of support your operations, or does it provide a new service or capability? And on the y-axis, what you have is who will use the solution, internal versus external. When you start to think about it, most of the solutions we're seeing today are AI for core business and AI for employees. Okay, and some of that is driven by the generative AI problem that I talked about earlier. But as agents are coming in, those are our first targets for operationalizing it. One of the examples that we operationalized within our environment first, this is about a year ago, with agentic AI, was certificate renewal. So if you manage infrastructure for your company, or if you kind of understand it, it's a bane of existence for about 40 years. Ever since the internet came out, your servers, the certificates expire quite often. Being able to renew those certificates, get them patched, schedule them for a change, it is very, very time-consuming. And it is also dependent on a lot of tacit knowledge. Because I may know how to do it at Rackspace, but if I leave tomorrow, the standard operating procedure is documented, but certain things like I know that these 3 certificates are provisioned by an internal provider versus these 2 come from an external provider. Those things are not documented. That's tacit knowledge. Agents are very good at uncovering that and repeating it and go out and drive that. So we start to see when you embed these things into your processes, this is going to change how IT operations work, and that's where you're going to see the benefits of AI show up in the next year plus, right? There's a lot of hype out there, but I think on the left-hand side is where you're going to see those use cases and the return on investment show up before you go to the right-hand side. And given the generative AI experience, a lot of customers are going to be very cautious about putting stuff in front of customers unless they can, in front of their customers, unless they can be very sure that the results are reproducible and explainable, right? So that's gonna. So this is the part where, like, I want you to kind of imagine. We talked about this. You could go back and look at my LinkedIn post from 3 years ago. When AI came out, I said, look, AI has gotten to the point where it is capable enough of performing some roles. Not all roles. Some roles it can do it. These solutions are available 24/7. It can speak multiple languages and doesn't take a holiday or any of those things. So for certain limited roles, it can actually perform that very well. So if that's the case, and it's going to be embedded into your process, you should never consider this as another technology solution. You should consider every AI solution you're bringing in as an employee. And why did I say that, like, at that time, and why would organizations kind of have a reluctance because they think this is another IT thing. This is very different. But if I want to make my HR partner comfortable with it, and my HR partner is Kelly Teal-Guess, and she's one of the most advanced thinkers when it comes to AI, because she believes this. I'm telling her that, like, look, you need to help me as an HR leader because you know how to hire people. You know what we're looking for. They need to have cultural alignment with us. I need to make sure that in the US, at least if I'm hiring an employee, I have to do a background check on that person to make sure that they're trustworthy and reliable. Why, if AI is capable as most employees, why would I not do that for AI? Why would I just go in? And this is I'm not making a value judgment on anything. Why would I bring in ChatGPT from OpenAI when I don't know what data it's been trained on into my environment? Why would I bring in any solution? I don't care if it's Salesforce Einstein, right? If I'm going to bring in Salesforce Einstein into my environment, I need to know what happens to the data. Do I have control over it? And am I able to kind of go out and explain it? And unless the provider of that AI solution can explain it to me, you have to understand the enterprise risk you're taking on. And the objective of putting it as an employee is, like, there are several things, everything from how do you hire them? How do you actually, when I bring a new employee in, I help the team acclimatize them by giving them the knowledge of the team and how they operate, and vice versa, right? They've got to get used to this new person getting added in. Why is AI any different? How do I just drop Copilot on your lap and say, like, go use it and I expect to see benefits? So there's a lot that you can learn from if you actually treat it as an employee. And so what we did to accelerate AI within Rackspace is this is like the next few slides where I'm taking what I just walked you through, and I'm going to show you how we operationalized it. First of all, what we did, like, in order for you to deploy your environment, security and privacy is paramount, and that has to be engineered into the platform. It doesn't matter whether you're running on AWS, Azure, in your own environment, you have to engineer it there because role-based access control, what data was accessed by whom, all of those have to be completely auditable. And if you start just buying and deploying solutions into your environment without those controls, it becomes a nightmare to manage it later. So the platform is the first place where we started, and we had a platform where you could deploy where the security components and others were built. On top of it, we built the fabric on it because the big thing that we were trying to do here is how do we actually scale this in our environment? It's not about one team being able to go build these solutions. It's about the 300 plus developers that we have. Can they all execute to this? And having conversations like model drift with all developers, not everyone's going to get it. So what we had to do is the more complex parts of it, when you kind of think about it, we had to actually engineer that into our platform. So we have a platform called Flow, which is the FAIR LLM Ops platform, which actually does that, right? It checks whenever a new model is released, it runs a battery of tests to see if there's been any model drift. If we're training, if we ran a fine-tuning thing, it automatically does it and says it's beyond our tolerance, pull it back, right? So there's things that are done here so that our users and our software developers can focus on the top, which is how do you actually build these agentic solutions. And to be able to do that and access a lot of the core capabilities of where we are in Rackspace, we built an entire MCP catalog. So we have about 35 MCP servers running in production, the Model Context Protocol things running in production. So today what happens is many rackers have got two things on their desktop. One is an application that allows them to do a lot of the RAG Plus and agentic solutions. The other one is the Claude desktop, right? The Claude Enterprise desktop. It's the enterprise version of Claude, which has been vetted through all of the things I talked about. And so what you can do is if you're an analyst in our finance department, I can do billing analysis without depending on any IT person. I bring up my Claude desktop, I select the 3 MCP servers I need to get into the backend system, and I have access to that data right away. This is where like a lot of our data science guys and data analytics guys kind of have a problem with it because like I'm coming at it from an old guy perspective. For 35 years, there's been only one model for data analytics, right? You can call it a data mesh fabric, whatever you want, but it's always been transactional systems have the data. In order to do the analytics and long-term analytics on it, I had to extract it and put it into some other schema. It used to be star schema before, now it's Databricks and Snowflake and others, but it's the same way you've tried to solve it with newer and newer technologies. The way this thing changes now is I actually can do an extract and load and transform when I need it. It's not ETL, it's ELT, right? Like I'm extracting and loading the data using the MCP server, and I transform as I need it. So if I have a finance analyst who's trying to figure out, are we going to hit our revenue numbers? He doesn't have to wait for the cycles for all the transformation to come through. They can do it themselves with AI, right? And that's what I mean by embedding it. Like now you're kind of changing established workflows, and you're trying to use agentic AI to go do that. So a quick thing that, and in order to support this, we actually had to have guidelines and guardrails. So our responsible AI guidelines actually establish the non-functional requirements for the solution. And the governance actually kind of makes sure that so NIST just came out with an update to their framework on AI. That's the governance piece that has to figure it out and then say, here are the changes I have to make at the platform level to be compliant with NIST. And those changes get implemented, right? So there's a very robust mechanism to go do that. So with this, what we did was essentially just built a solution that allows our rackers to go out and develop that. And as we did that, like one of the biggest things about the unit I run is called FAIR, the Foundry for AI by Rackspace. My primary job is to help customers implement AI. But instead of using PowerPoints and things to go do that, we just made Rackspace customer zero. So that's why I started off with, don't look at me as an expert. I can give you a practical, this thing is, this works and that doesn't work for us. But if you're going to try to implement it in your environment, at least learn from the lessons we had, and then go from there. So what we did was everything that we've done, whether it's the platform, which is up here, the reference architecture platform, or the MCP catalog, we actually made them solutions that, like when a customer comes in, 2 years ago, we had to spin up the entire landing zone, and it took us about 2 to 3 months to do it. I can do that in about 2 days today. Bring in the Terraform script, run it in your Azure or AWS environment, and I'm telling you, 85% of the time, we're just sitting there and loosening the controls we've put in. Because people say, like, what you guys have put in is too restrictive. Because we've been very, very, true to NIST and the guidelines that they've set in terms of auditability. We most of the times have to go back and relax our controls so that it operates in a client environment, which is not a bad place to be in. It's better than trying to fix this after the fact. So that concept of AI as an employee, we've actually taken it to this, and every single day I have a new, not every single day, probably every month I've got a new AI racker. Like this is set up like it's one of our badges. We actually give it a name, a personality, and a specific task that it can do. And since they're agentic, I can use it through my Workday portal, or I can have them, we don't have this built yet, but I can have them join my Teams calls as an agent listening in. So you can have a natural language conversation with them. So the idea is every one of these solutions performs a specific function. It is auditable because if I actually have Rita, which is our IT agent, if you go request a laptop from Rita, or if you ask it to reset your password, it does everything that a human employee would do. Goes and creates a ServiceNow record, right, the ticket for it. It'll go fulfill that. The minute it's done, it goes and closes it out, right, so that when somebody comes in and says, who ordered that, who provisioned it, and how was it done, it's completely auditable. So we set these things up, and what we've been doing is consistently releasing this. But the true test is not whether you can create these solutions. Yesterday, I was on a call where I was talking to one of the teams that's building out Rita. And the head of that unit basically said, look, we've changed how we operate. And I said, explain to me what you're doing. We use Amazon Kiro for code development. We don't use Replit or Cursor or something. We use Kiro. And he said, you can see, Srini, here's my org chart. I've now added Kiro as a paired programmer because every developer on Rita uses Kiro as a paired programmer. So they get a bug report. The bug report is given to Kiro. Kiro goes through the code and says, I think this is most likely the place where you've got the issue. Do you want me to fix it? So you either have it fix it, or you make the change. Right? So now, this is not, how do I use Windsurf or Cursor to create the code and figure out how to fit it into my process? This has changed how they do maintenance on an AI solution. That's when you know agents are actually starting to get embedded into what you do, and they can perform that. By the way, in all of these situations, it is not a job replacement solution. It's a job simplification solution, right? We're not using Kiro to write new code, but if you think about the amount of tech debt that exists in any organization, what you can do with something like Kiro is to give it the code base, and it's going to point out all of the issues. It's going to ask you, do you want me to fix it? Typically, what you have to do is the guardrails that you have to put in, you have to set it up. If you don't set it up, it's going to kind of every time create new code. Because remember this, all these code development tools still use LLMs, so it's not deterministic. I may not get the same answer twice. So if within Rackspace, if I have a particular library I need to use, I have to specify it in my model spec. If I don't specify it in my model spec, Kiro will generate code, but it's going to have a different result every time. So it is actually getting embedded into the software process and redefining how you build and support applications. And that's where we're headed, right? So what we've done is, in order to do all of this, I said the people have to get trained. We spend probably as much, if not more, training our people as this. So this is a model that's well established, right? It's called the adult learning model, which basically says adults learn a specific way. They get 10% of their learning from books and courses and everything else. 20% comes from social learning, whether it's with a mentor, whether it's with your peers, because you find a bug and you show it to one of your peers and they give you a different solution, or they give you a solution. So 20% of the learning comes from social learning, and then 70% comes from applying it in the application. So our normal career path for existing software engineers is we have a very specific curriculum. Internally within Rackspace, we standardize on AWS. So we're very, very clear as to what courses we want you to take. We give them digital credentials. You get the AWS course, and then you finish this LLM course, you'll get one of our FAIR credentials. So those are all things, incentives to make sure that they spend the time investing in themselves. That's the first step. The second step is once you do have these things, we actually start bringing people into guilds. Right? These are nothing more than guilds. Every one of these things is, we don't call it a guild, but the Claude experience is we've rolled out Claude to 300 users in the company. Every Friday, they get together to share experiences. Like, you'll have an HR person come in and say, I use this, but I'm getting a different result every time. I need it to show up like this. And there's someone on IT saying, I've already solved that. Here's a markdown, import it into Claude, and next time around, that dashboard that you're looking for always shows up exactly the same way. That's people learning from one another, right? Like, this is not Srini coming in and telling them to learn a certain way. Once this is done, if you're in IT or in information security, we actually put you into an AI team, which it's a hybrid team. Typically, a hybrid team has 7 or 8 people in it and 2 or 3 AI agents in it. So, if you know how to work with it and you know how to this thing, then you become a lot more productive in here. We've done this in the technology realms. We are working with our HR partners to do the same thing. So I've talked to Kelly and said, Kelly, let's take your HR people through this. Once they're done, I can actually put them into a role where if you want to use AI to review your resumes or aggregate it so that you know which resumes to go detail into, or create a set of questions that are very tailored to the person you're driving it, or any process in HR, whether it's from recruitment to performance management to any of those things. How do you actually use AI responsibly? That's what it does when you actually go through this. And so we talk about AI fluency, and if you get to AI, so this is the first badge you get is AI literate, which is, I know what an LLM is, I know what a prompt is, I can write a decent prompt on others. But AI fluent actually takes you even more, saying, you actually don't have to go take a prompt course. Write your first prompt and ask ChatGPT or Claude to write a better prompt. It'll do way better than any other course you can go take. Right? And then here's how you go out and modify. So you move from AI literate to AI fluent, and as you start using this, you start to develop the mastery in this thing. Unless we do this, mass job replacement is a reality. If we do this, my view is very simple. The economy and the growth in the economy is not a zero-sum game. It doesn't mean that if somebody's going to win, the other person has to lose. The way I talk to my IT team, which is about 350 people, and this is with 350 people, I support a company that is about $3 billion in revenue. What if the same 350 with AI can support a $10 billion company? Right? That's really a growth mindset as opposed to a zero-sum game. And I think a lot of people kind of make the mistake of treating it as a zero-sum game, because I do think that AI has the possibility to unlock a lot of business value, and that's where we should be focused on. So as I said, this is my last slide. This is what I do on a daily basis. I run this organization called Foundry for AI by Rackspace. We were very careful in selecting the name. We called it a foundry, not a center of excellence or any of those things, because every day, just like a foundry, you're bringing raw materials in to create something of value. That's what we're trying to do. And we started this business unit in March of 2023. We're up to 100 plus solutions. And I can tell you, all the data you're seeing from MIT and others are true. We've got 100 plus solutions. How many of them are running in production? 20, right? And most of the times, it's because of two reasons. One is they did the pilot because the board wanted to see something with AI, and they quickly put it together, and there's no ROI on it. The second is it's still a valuable solution, but they did not invest in training their people. So people are stuck in their old ways in terms of, here's my process, here's the way I know how to do software development. That doesn't work for me. I think we've got to cross both of those boundaries before you start to see AI go in. I think agentic AI is going to help with the first one, which is you can build solutions that actually go to your core systems and deliver value right away. And then leaders have to invest in their people. They should not look at this as a zero-sum game, because I think if we do that, this will never take off, right? That's my thing. I think you can go to our fair.rackspace.com or stop by the booth. We actually took a lot of our learnings and put it into a playbook. Don't get fooled by it like it's both soccer and American football, right? But we said, like, look, building a team as a CIO is kind of like being a coach of Man U or Manchester United or Chelsea. To build a dynasty, you have to kind of have a system that works. And then players come in and go, and they can actually deliver great results. It's the same way. If you're building an IT team, you have to have a playbook that has certain plays that you can decide as a coach which ones to execute. But if you do that, then you can build a dynasty, right? You can build a team that may not win every year, but it wins consistently. And that's the whole idea behind getting AI and AI operationalized. So fair.rackspace.com, you should be able to download any of those. Or I think we've got a limited set of copies sitting in our booth up there. So I think I am at the top of my time, but do we take questions here or no? Okay, excellent. So I appreciate you guys taking the time. I should be hanging around our booth for a little bit more. If somebody wants to come talk to me, that's great. But I hope that it was helpful to you, right? You know, I tried to bring the CIO's perspective into it and the leader's perspective into it. And I hope every one of you spends the time to become AI fluent. If you're not that today, take the time. It's going to be very important. I have a 26-year-old and a 33-year-old. I worry about them, right? Because 10 years, they're 11, 12, 13 years into the workforce, like the older one, and the younger one is 5 years in. I've had a long and reasonably successful career. Their careers are going to get interrupted. And like they'll when I go home and say, "Yeah, Dad, I know AI," right? You know, because every day I'm talking to them about it. Because I don't worry about my 6-year-old grandkid. She is like, she knows she can ask Siri anything. She doesn't know where Siri is and which one is answering or that, and she knows that if she's in this room, she's got to ask Google, and in the other room, she's got to ask Siri, right? These kids are growing up with AI. So they're going to be very, very different than the current generation that is somewhere between 20 or 17, 18, and about 40, 45. Right? That's the population you have to worry about if you don't get AI fluent. The job losses and others that we're talking about, it's almost going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So take the time to invest in yourself, in AI fluency, and come talk to me if you have any questions. Thank you.